Now, my job right now is to introduce the commencement speaker. So, members of the NOU Florida class of 2018, I am personally pleased by the fact that your graduation experience will be distinctive by reason of the commencement speaker who you are about to hear. NOU's own distinguished professor of practice, Jim Schott, who is more than a member of this family. He is the spiritual father, actually the godfather of NOU Florida. He is our consigliere. I would call him Papa if our ages weren't so close. Many of you know Professor Jim Schott's impressive career arc from beginning his career as the only athletic coach in the state of Indiana who ever taught Latin, to his service as a principal in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and as a rising school district administrator in Ohio and ultimately Florida, where he served as superintendent of Orange County, Florida schools for 12 years. Recently, he was elected to the Orange County Schools Hall of Fame. Most commencement speakers don't have this personal a connection with members of the graduating class. Most are chosen for reasons related to celebrity or perhaps benefit to the institution. I've heard of institutions inviting Oprah Winfrey as a commencement speaker in the hopes that the graduates will all find keys to new cars under their seats. Just a hint, don't bother checking this afternoon. There is a word for this type of commencement speaker: stuffy. I promise you, our own Jim Schott will not be stuffy. He will indeed be worth listening to. Seriously, he's put a lot of thought into his commencement address, and I'm confident that it will be uplifting and worthwhile. But today will be special for two reasons. First and foremost, we're honoring you, the graduating class. We're also honoring Professor Schott's own commencement, literally his promotion, from Distinguished Professor of Practice, already such an elevated rank that only 3 professors have held this rank in the history of NLU. He's been promoted by the Board of Trustees to the rank of Professor Emeritus. I have to relate to you that I've often been asked by NLU's graduate students and even faculty, you know, Jim Schott is the most self-confident man I have ever met in my entire life. Why is Jim Schott so self-confident? I've been able to discern 2 causative factors for why this man is so resolutely self-confident. First, when he played NCAA basketball and he faced the legendary Oscar Robertson, known as the Big O, in one titanic battle on the basketball court, our own Jim Schott held Oscar Robertson to scoring a trivial 62 points. Oscar later autographed a photograph in contrite homage to Jim's legendary defensive skills. Second, Professor Schott came to NLU after leading Orange County schools for 13 years. He balanced a $1 billion budget there. He led a 1,000 square mile school district, 100 miles by 100 miles. He flew to Chicago to assume the mantle of the NLU professoriate in a veritable coronation. As a somewhat veteran faculty, I was assigned to meet him for the first time at O'Hare Airport in Chicago and to make sure that he got to the campus. Jim is so self-confident that he thanked the NOU president for assigning him this young chauffeur at the airport, who did a pretty good job of getting him to NOU's halls of wisdom at Evanston, as I recall. Now, it has been rumored that Professor Schott has enlisted other faculty into chauffeuring roles. Don't know if that's true, but I stand proudly by the claim that I am Jim Schott's original NOU chauffeur. On the serious side, I'm here to testify that Jim Schott has the most expansive and generous human spirit that I have ever been privileged to experience in a colleague. His relentless dedication to his NOU graduate students, especially his doctoral students, is legendary across this whole university. Jim has done more than any other faculty member I know to bridge his graduates forward into leadership positions in principalships, district positions, and superintendencies just by tapping his vast network, where he has sterling credibility. As one example, he's elevated an NOU Florida doctoral grad into a school district superintendency in Georgia. Jim also has a private side that is effused with generosity that parallels his resolute dedication to his NOU students. For private reasons, Jim and Jenny Schott have relentlessly pursued a decades-long fundraising and organizational crusade to promote medical science addressing blindness and sight disorders. They have led the Vision Walk of Orlando for the Foundation Fighting Blindness. They've enlisted luminaries such as ESPN's Lee Corso and basketball celebrities with the Orlando Magic in annual fundraisers that have raised formidable amounts of serious money to combat diseases of the eye. Finally, in this serious, if not somber mood, I need to address and mention the depth of respect that Jim enjoys among his NOU faculty colleagues. Jim is that rare leader who elevates the entire team's efficacy and the individual effectiveness of all those who work with him. I am privileged and honored to introduce to you, with love and respect, my colleague, Professor Emeritus Jim Schott.
That was more than I can deserve, but I'd sure like a copy of it for my eulogy. It sounded pretty good to me. My wife's already going like this with the watch. She said if I take more than 10 minutes, she's going to lead you all out in terms of what I say. I want to say something, but Jenny, I want to introduce my wife, Jenny, over there. Would you please stand, Jenny? I got to tell you why. She and I met her once on the way to practice senior year in college, and at any rate, I saw her somewhere, and I looked at her, and I said, I'm going to marry her someday. We dated actually for 4 years, and then on August 11th, 1962, we married, and we'll celebrate on August 11th our 56th wedding anniversary. I consider that a much better achievement than guarding Oscar Robertson. But altogether, she's been my girlfriend for 60 years. So she's your friend tonight. She's going to keep me to 10 minutes. I want to clarify something. I did lead our scoring against Oscar. I hit 7 out of 8. He hit 23 out of 60. Who's the better shooter? In fact, we played Xavier University, and after the game, Oscar came down to see somebody else that played with us. And he was reminded of my defense. He said he wouldn't have gotten his scholarship if it weren't for my defense. So I did something really great for him. Thank you to National Louis University and its board and its leaders for recognizing me with that wonderful emeritus status. I appreciate it so much. In part, it means I'm old. But I hope it has something to do with all the things that I, along with my colleagues, have done for many students just like you. For the record, incidentally, I want to clarify something. Dan Buckman, every class we team taught together, he got up in front of the class and he said 2 things. The first thing he said was, I failed all my senior exams. And the second thing he said was, the reason I failed is I had trouble writing legibly on a cave wall. Now I deny the first count. The second count in terms of the writing on cave walls, I plead the 5th. I am old. But after considerable reflection on what I might speak about tonight, I thought about all the many leaders, both in the public and private sectors, I've had the opportunity to meet and work with over the years. And there have been many just outstanding people. And I began to think about what makes them so distinguishable, what makes them so unique. And I happened to come up with 5 characteristics that I thought I'd share with you tonight as graduates. And I'm going to be bold enough to say that I think they might be worth you taking into consideration when you leave. It's kind of a to-be list. Now, your graduation this evening addresses in large part the first characteristic. You're in a very strong position, not just to be as happy and successful as these other people that I'm talking about, because you've demonstrated the intelligence, the knowledge, the commitment needed to earn your degree. That means a lot. You are an expression of this great university and its history and its traditions that have always focused on social justice. The great leaders I have known live by what I call an ethic of benevolence. They've been willing workers, volunteers, and focused on the needs of others, anything but self-absorbed. They were celebrators of diversity, not just acceptors of it. Be ethical, be benevolent. The second characteristic was inspired by a quote from a book I read in 1950. That tells you how old my wife is. Excuse me, how old I am. The book was titled, it was by David Reisman, it was The Lonely Crowd. He created characters of various sorts that represented psychological types. And I was particularly drawn to one description of a 12-year-old girl and what she wanted to be. She said, and I quote, "I would like to be able to fly if everyone else did, but otherwise it would be kind of conspicuous." Well, the persons I'm talking about did not mind being conspicuous, when it was for the right reasons. They were always ahead of their times. They were progressive in thinking about innovating and creating new products, new services. And today, your diplomas are that little girl's wings. So that characteristic is be conspicuous. Conspicuous people also speak out on issues that mandate being heard. And so fly beyond the obvious and speak out. Recently, I recalled a story about a petite little first grader. And in class, she was drawing a picture. Her head was down and busily doing that while the teacher was talking. The teacher kind of quietly walked back to see her and turned over, looked at her and said, "Excuse me, but what are you drawing?" And that little girl looked up and said, "I'm drawing the face of God." Well, the teacher asked, "How can you draw someone you've never seen or that no one else has ever seen?" "Well, if you give me a second, I'll show him." And so that leads to the third characteristic. You don't have to see things for them to be real. Persons I'm talking about they were driven by ideas others couldn't see with their mind's eyes. The high achievers not only saw them, but they also reflected on responsibilities and literally gave ideas life. Be insightful. See and do what others can't. The fourth characteristic possessed is a clear sense of purpose. A purpose can be defined as a person's reason for living or an organization's reason for being. I recall a statement written by Peter Senge, a brilliant senior lecturer at MIT. He said, "Vision, mission, and goals are merely good ideas, but meaningless without underlying purpose." It's the why behind anything that you do. It's often tacit, sometimes dormant, but it's there. Successful persons I knew focused and refocused on purpose. I have told my students this story, they're going to hear it again. The most successful funeral director and owner in the Midwest, if not the nation, worked with his staff for 2 years in coming up with his business's purpose. And he attended a national conference of these funeral directors and owners. And one of the three topics was, what is your purpose? There were three groups addressing that. One group met and said, the purpose of our business is to make money. They had considerable arguments over that, but they ended up with that. The second said, it's to provide excellent services. Money is a secondary thing. While the most successful funeral owner and director in the country said, my company rejected both of those purposes. and adopted a singular one. It's not about making money. It's not about providing excellent services. It's to facilitate grieving. You see, to make money leads to cutting corners. To provide excellent services leads to keep doing the same things you've always done the same way. But to facilitate grieving focuses on the people going through one of the most difficult times in their lives, and you give them different meaning. You help them work it through. I have to tell you, I've given some thought to my purposes. As superintendent of schools, I had a simple educational personal purpose, and it's this: to teach children and youth to learn to learn. You know, if that were anybody's purpose today, we wouldn't be testing kids working on it 90 out of 180 days. Because that has nothing to do with teaching them to learn. Well, be consciously purposeful and act like you mean it. Finally, the fifth characteristic of the people I'm referencing they all had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge in all phases of their lives, not just their career. I will be 79 in 4 days, but I must confess to you, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And Peter Pan is my idol. So meanwhile, I'm writing a book. And I'll end by reading a brief statement in it, but the background is I was on a family trip, Jenny and I and several of our family members, in North Carolina, and we were kind of lost, or thought we were lost on a dark, winding, wooded road. And we had to find some place. We saw this light on the eave of a building, and we saw it. We went to it. I went up to the porch. We made a call, and wouldn't you know it, the cabin that we were looking for was right across the bridge 100 feet away. We were practically on top of it. Well, I use that as kind of a metaphor for learning. And it seems, I'm going to read that to you, if you don't mind. It seems no matter where I've been on my life's journey, there are few cabins just across a bridge where I can rest from learning, since what to know keeps growing like a forest undergrowth. The woods of understanding can be dark and winding. Albert Schweitzer once said, as we acquire knowledge, things do not become more comprehensible, but more mysterious. Schweitzer's truth has driven me to become a lifelong learner. It seems the more I learn, the greater the revelation of what I don't know. Discovery has led to discovery ad infinitum. I learn one must be humble enough to seek information and directions, to find a way through the wooded, winding, dark roads of ignorance. Learning never stopped for these successful people I talked to you about, that I have known, that I've tried to model after. So learning doesn't end for any of you today, but it's a great place to be on the road to learning forever. God bless you. Thank you very much. Congratulations.